What up, world? And welcome back to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. It's your host, Colin Walters, and I'm very excited for our show today. We have a live interview with a good friend of mine, a former colleague, my former manager, Rachel Snider. And Rachel is based out of Bellevue, Washington, and she works within the technology and SaaS industry. For those of you that don't know, SaaS stands for Software as a Service. And she has a specialized focus in business development. And for those that are unfamiliar, business development is essentially the bridge between sales, operations, and marketing to help sellers create and close new business, close deals, and win more. She actually started as a BDR, a business development representative at Nintex, where she is currently at. And she worked her way up through management roles. She progressed into leadership roles, where she now is the director of global business development for all of Nintex and oversees a team of 30 individuals, SDRs, BDRs, VPs, spanning the globe from Australia to London, Thailand, Singapore, all of North America. I'm probably forgetting some more, but she has grown a very successful business within the business, which is super cool. And she also has a passion for helping individuals break into the tech industry. So if you have any interest at all or have thought about it in the past, reach out to her. She is a wealth of knowledge. She is phenomenal to talk to. She has helped a lot of people, including myself, get and break into the industry and do it successfully. And so she would be a great resource for you. When she is not helping individuals progress in their careers within the tech industry and SaaS industry, Rachel can be found hanging out with family, friends, and almost even more so hanging out with her husband Miles and their baby Corgi, who's not so much a baby anymore, but Darby. And she also has an obsession with plants, and you'll learn a little bit more about that. Tap into her creative side into this week's episode and what some of those interests are. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and hand this show over to our interview between myself and Rachel Snider. Here we go. Rachel, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on to the Seeds of Success podcast. It's a pleasure to have you, and happy Thursday, Rachel. It's good to see you.
Happy Thursday. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this was an exciting episode, everybody, and one that I was really looking forward to because, quite honestly, like, I would not be in the position that I am right now if it wasn't for this woman right here. And reason being, Rachel was the reason that I got into the tech industry. She is a huge reason why I have been successful and, basically why I was able to, make my way through being an SDR and breaking into the tech world and SaaS industry, and then getting promoted to an account executive and doing the podcast. Like, Rachel is a huge reason why I'm even here. And so it's an honor and it's a privilege to have you on the show, call you a friend. So Rachel Snider, which
Yes.
I'm excited to call you now. Welcome to the show. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introducing yourself for the audience. That'd be awesome, Rachel.
Yeah, of course. It's funny. It took 2 years of trying to recruit you over, and then finally we made it happen. But it was really fun working with you. I know I had been at Nintex for a bit before you had joined. So I originally joined Nintex as a BDR, pretty similar to the role you had done. But kind of what happened before you had joined was I was ultimately one of a couple people at the time doing the BDR role. Much smaller of an organization then. We didn't have much process or as many tools as we have now. So it was really just building things up from the ground up, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, breaking some stuff, fixing a lot of stuff, and ultimately just growing out that team year over year, expanding over to different regions and expanding the team, the footprint in the US too. Starting with just, I think, me and one other rep at the time when I had joined, up to now we have about 30 people globally. So it's grown quite a bit in the last like 6.5 to 7 years.
And it, having been a part of that, I've been there for the growth, was there for the growth. I was, up until I left, I was there as the whole thing was growing, as you were building the teams out. And for everybody that is listening to this episode, Rachel, I am going to assume that there's a couple things. One, they know you and they know what you've done and are interested in you and hearing what you have to say as a leader, in tech, in SaaS. But also I'm going to assume that people are interested for the sales side of our conversation, business development, leadership. And for those who are listening that don't even, know the first thing about sales and business, I think that it would be helpful to even just take a quick step back and, and really describe what is a BDR for those that don't even know. Because that's where you started in the world. There's probably people listening that are thinking about trying to break into the tech industry. Maybe they've toyed with the idea. Maybe they're just trying to get better in sales within their industry. I know we'll jump into some personal development stuff here at some point. It'll be something for everybody in this episode. I mean, let's just take a step back. What is a BDR and how the heck did you even get started there?
Yeah, so it popped up to me through a referral from a friend, Claire. But I think what is helpful context now looking back, which I hope more people can understand, especially people who are trying to get into tech, is that it's really a good entry level position, regardless of if you're experienced in other types of industries prior to that. But it's a good way to get your foot in the door, to get into tech and really get a landscape of the type of SaaS companies that are out there, how they operate, not just in the sales side of it, because not everyone ends up going into sales, but understanding what is marketing. It's not just posting on Instagram and that side of things. It's much more complex, from Google Ads to managing a tech stack and things like that. So I think in terms of the day-to-days, it's basically for a BDR, you're managing the inbound inquiries that are coming in from the website. The terminology may vary from company to company. So you'll hear BDR, SDR, but oftentimes there's one role that does the inbound. So they're screening to see, are these people a potential fit for your business? And if so, passing it over to the sales team. Now, the SDR role, which is what you had joined as, is primarily outbound focus. So trying to generate interest out of almost thin air. Sometimes we have some intent data, but ultimately our jobs, BDR or SDR, is to identify opportunities for the sales team and just getting those teed up so that, they have more at-bats as sellers.
And so having started as a BDR, right, you got into the tech industry, and thank you for outlining that for people that weren't familiar. But when you started there, did you have a vision for where you wanted to go? And did you have a plan for how you wanted to progress in your career? And obviously, you started as a BDR. Actually, for those that don't know, you started really at Nordstroms, doing floor sales.
Technically.
So
that was a straight out of college job. Tried to go corporate. Wasn't in retrospect, it just wasn't aligned with my core values and passions of mine. Good foundation, but technically that was where it started. And then after about a year or so post college doing that, that's when I got the referral into Nintex.
Yeah. And why did you say yes to getting into Nintex?
Honestly, it boiled down to, I had asked Claire. I didn't, to be honest, know much about the tech. The tech was very confusing to me at that moment in time. I ended up figuring it out by the time I signed. But what was most interesting to me was, do you enjoy like waking up every morning and doing what you do? And do you enjoy the people that you work with and the person you report to? And that was all I cared about at that time. Because I didn't feel like in some instances, I didn't have some of those things in my prior role. I didn't feel like I was having the opportunity to really blossom, or if I had ideas, they were shut down without any explanation as to why. And so, that was the main reason that drove me to want to join Nintex.
And I think that's such a huge reflection point that I think people can take away that are listening to this episode. Are you enjoying what you're doing when you wake up every day? Right. And of course, there's going to be days where you don't absolutely love every second of every day. That's with anything that we do. There
Mhm.
are things that just need to get done. And but for the most part, are you enjoying what you're doing 80% of the time? Right. And almost even, at least for me, and I think, based on what you just said, I think it's equally important for you, but who are you working with and
Mm.
who are you
Yeah.
learning from and working under? Because those are huge, like who you are interacting with every day. And, in preparation for this episode, I was feeling super grateful for the people that I've worked with and worked for in my life, the mentors that I've had. And specifically, Rachel, I really loved my time coming into Nintex, working with our team and the people at the organization and working for you and learning from you. And I think that is such an important aspect for when individuals and people are, taking a moment to evaluate where they're at in life, where they're at with their careers, with their jobs, if they're looking to make a change and really evaluating their top priorities. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, well, first I'm glad that you brought that up because it was something I wanted to touch on. And I'm curious, like, when as you continued progressing, how did you continue to evolve with the people that you were working with the people that you're working under? Were you continuing to, how did you see that your career progressing, like as you finally got in there with those as your top priorities?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier too, like, did I have a vision for where I thought my career was going to be? The honest answer is no. I think at the
Okay.
time I thought, oh, I'll be an account manager. That's what everyone else has done. And so I did the things to progress in that way. And I ultimately hit a fork in the road where my manager at the time basically said, hey, do you want to pursue leadership or do you want to pursue the sales side? I think you could do great at both, but it's up to you to decide. And I felt more drawn to the leadership side because I felt like the opportunity I had in front of me was still so great. Like I could still see so much growth in the business development space because it was so honestly neglected. Like it was kind of an afterthought. And so I thought that if I could put gasoline on the fire, it could really grow into something great, expand, new roles. We'd reach new industries and help significantly impact our team's pipeline. And so for me, that was kind of the initial path forward. But it's interesting because I think as a woman, I kind of understand now better that I should have asked for promotions at the time, but the reality was I didn't. And they were given to me because my work was recognized. But I think now looking back, I'm like, man, I would give different advice to people. I would ask them to try to, shoot for that recognition and the titles that they want. But to be honest with you, I just had gotten recognized for my work and it helped me rise in my career.
I think it's an important point that you make, and it was something that somebody at Nintex had told me as well. It was Amanda actually, who, when we were talking about next steps, growth, development within our career, what are those next steps going to be? Is that you got to make it known. And
Mm-hmm.
if you got your eyes set on something, and
Yeah.
which maybe not everybody does, kind of like you were just mentioning, you didn't quite know what that path was going to be exactly, but when you do, it's important to make it known and have those conversations with people around you, with people that are in positions to, that have authority to
Mm-hmm.
provide the assistance to get you to that next step. And then, when everybody knows, right, we called it at Nintex, be the no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
still live by that to this day. It was something that was taught to myself and us early on, was to be the no-brainer when that opportunity presents itself. And part of that is people need to know what you're coming for and what you want to do. And because nobody's
Mm-hmm.
going to advocate for you like you. And
Yeah.
I think that's the bottom line. And so last point I want to make that you touch on is taking action towards a direction that you're interested in and know you want to go without knowing the full vision is totally okay.
Yeah.
You know,
And in my case, they created a whole new role. Like it didn't exist. And that's what was more challenging is I'm like, okay, well, if I'm investing time and energy into this direction where I know that we don't have enough support, no one can guarantee me that a role would exist, but I was fortunate to have a strong mentor, leader, manager who kept pushing for that. And he recognized before I was able to recognize that that was a common vertical in a lot of other industries. We just had been not yet mature enough to have that in our organization. So he slowly kind of paved the way, but gave me the tools. And like over time, I started to recognize, like, oh, okay, this is a career path that I could work towards.
And you're saying specifically that business development manager role, right?
Yeah. And even to the details of like, this is the titles that they use. And like, when we get to that place, whether it be a year from now, here's the right way to like formulate the title so that it's, you know, going to help you out in your career long term.
It's cool. It sounds kind of like, you know, for business terms, like a scrappy startup type of mindset, right? Like get in without, you know, the crystal clear vision, but just continue figuring it out. And that's in a progressive direction. How long did it take for you to feel like you really got a hang of that new role? And like, how did that
like
whole
a leadership role or the BDR role?
like the BDR manager role. So when you decided, so just to take a quick step back, right? You were thinking sales or management. Basically, that was the conversation. Hey, Rachel, which route do you want to go? You chose management. And so then, you know, now it's okay, let's figure out titles. Now it's let's figure out how many people to have in each role. How do we do outbound with inbound? And like, did you feel like every day was just totally something different? And like, when did you feel like you were kind of in a groove and like things were clicking for you?
It's hard to say because I think I would say today, yes, I feel like I'm in my groove, but that's not to say I don't have new challenges that I face all the time, like week over week, like even this week hit a new experience I haven't been dealt with yet, but I don't know. I think you get comfortable after a while. I think that first like initial transition is challenging because I went from being peers to managing my peers. So that was the first leap of, okay, this is new, this is different. How do I navigate this? And then managing people who are older than me. At one point in time, I was the youngest person, yet I was managing a team of a bunch of people older than me. So it's kind of the imposter syndrome of, am I the best person for this job? But then kind of realizing, no, I have the right experience, but going back and forth with that. But at every stage of different scope of leadership, it's just now level setting. Okay, I've mastered ish, you know, the previous part of my responsibilities, but now I have this whole new responsibilities of managing people in Europe. I'm new to understanding business in Europe. So now I got to up level and understand that part of my business. So I'm still uncomfortable, but like I will get there in time. So it's like, there's not really a point in time where I feel like you master and you feel super confident. You feel confident in a section and then you take on the next section.
Yeah. And I think that's the bottom line is being, you know, kind of like super cliche, but being comfortable in those uncomfortable different aspects of the job, right? Like you're not going to always have everything figured out.
And they get more comfortable over time too.
Those
the uncomfortable becomes more comfortable over time.
How did you get over, if you ever did? And I know that, you know, speaking from myself, I still, and I think a lot of people can experience imposter syndrome. I think that's a big thing that you just brought up, and it's very real. You know, I stand up here, I'm like, who am I to even have this podcast, right? Like, who am I to like speak to seeds of success, right? When, you know, I just turned 30 and, you know, like there's still so much doubt that can creep in with anything that we're doing, whether it be business or relationships or fitness, like whatever journey you're on an aspect of life. Like how did you handle that as a leader when managing either people that you felt were more tenured or older than you? Is that something that you just continue to, like, how did you actually go about handling that mentally?
Yeah, so I think in the beginning, I leaned on the resources that were provided to me, meaning like my managers. I had a coach, Bill Zip, who I worked with, and they would kind of validate me, and I would seek validation too. I'd be like, "Hey, I'm running into this. What do you think about how the way I'm handling it? Should I do it differently?" And I'd get validated, like, "No, the way you initially thought it through was right." And then outside of that, I went out of my way to go seek validation almost from external resources. So like I reached out to an organization called 81 Cents to understand, like, based off my experience and my tenure, a bunch of different factors. Basically, it would be sent out to other organizations doing similar type of work, similar roles type of thing. And they would tell me, is my compensation fair, or helping me basically to like package up my negotiation. So I also worked with a company called She Negotiates, who also coached me and helped me understand my own worth and build the self-confidence to say, other people doing the same job are making this much. Here's what I bring to the table, and like validate that for me to say, no, like I am the best person fit for this job. I should be compensated at this in this way at this much. And I think now later in my career, I'm trying to not seek that validation from other people and try to find it within me, which has been a unique challenge. But yeah, I think either seeking it from others or constantly reminding myself and of what has happened to fuel me for what's to come.
And I think it's real validation too. It's self-validation and external validation through things that are real. And I think sometimes we can just play down our accomplishments or play down who we are, things we've done. And so that's one thing I've always appreciated about you, is that you're very resourceful as well. And it's never just sitting back and thinking about things, but actually going and being resourceful, taking action, reaching out to these organizations and external parties to actually work through these things proactively. And it's something I've always appreciated. And so
Thank you.
yeah, well, and props to you, Rachel. It's been really cool to see how far you have come. How many people are actually like working under you at this point, when running business development globally for Nintex? Managing, I know you've been over to Australia a couple times and London, and you've gone from a BDR without any vision to the director of global business development, and it's really cool, Rachel.
Appreciate it.
What are you currently working on? How many people are actually reporting to you? How is your current situation going?
So at the moment we have I have four managers. I have two in the US, one that does strictly inbound, one that does outbound, and then they have their teams as well. And then in London, I have a manager who oversees our inbound and outbound team. And then I have another manager based out of Melbourne, Australia, who again oversees the inbound outbound team. But all up, we're sitting around 25 to 30 people. It's always kind of shifting, people getting promoted, moving around. So that's where we're at.
And you mentioned, always going through interview processes. I know you mentioned going through that currently. For people listening in, for people watching right now that are either going through interview processes themselves, or perhaps they're thinking about going through some rounds of interviews, or they're wondering how they could have done better in previous interviews, what are some things as a leader and as I would say an expert interviewer at this point in time, what are some things that you look for in candidates, and what are some characteristics that you might look for, or some things that stand out typically? What are some of your thoughts on like how people can actually find success in that interview process?
Yeah, I think if I were in their shoes right now, I think first off, I would be very selective, kind of like a few approach as opposed to a many, in terms of how many companies you want to apply to. Because I know I empathize, a lot of people have been laid off recently and they maybe are frantically trying to find a new role, but I think you'll have more success if you really boil down, take a second, think about what are the attributes or the about the company, the role, the team that you really care about the most, and find those organizations, maybe it's 5 or less, and really invest your energy in those in terms of sending the thank you letters post interview, or reaching out to those people who are part of the hiring team on LinkedIn to express your eagerness and excitement to learn more about the role. Because I think it shows oftentimes when people are doing a mass application and then you show up to the call, you really don't even know what you're applying for. And I think in turn, if you do that homework, you'll have many more questions to ask the people that you meet with in your interviews. Because for me, people who don't have any questions at the end, I think it gets brought up a lot, but to me, it's like, if you really want to envision yourself in that role, you should have some types of questions for everyone that you speak to, because each of them has such a unique experience that they've gone through. And don't overthink it. Just genuinely like try to get to know the person, what their experience has been like at the organization, tips they would give to a new hire, whatever it is, like always come with some type of question to the person that you're interviewing. I think beyond that, just be authentic. I think oftentimes a lot of people think that you have to put on this show and only showcase the best parts of yourself. But I think the other side of it is when things didn't go your way or you had a big failure, it's not bad that that happened, but what did you do after? And so oftentimes that's an area where I focus a lot of my interviews on, and see how people articulate that to me of what they did after those low moments. Did they work to find ways to not repeat that? Or did they grovel and make excuses and try to deflect blame to other people? Or they just straight up avoid the question altogether. So my tip is just, be authentic and be yourself, and ask good questions.
Yeah, ask good questions. I think that's so big, right? And at least coming prepared with 2-3 questions minimum. Don't let the time ever end early, I would say.
Yeah, and just be genuinely curious. Like if you're really invested in getting in this role, like you want to enjoy it, like ask about work-life balance, whatever it is that you care about, ask those questions. So I just, especially recently, I've been in a lot of interviews in the years where people have nothing by the time they reach my interview. Granted, they've spoken with a couple people prior, but you're gonna, even if you ask the same question sometimes to different people, like, what do you enjoy most about working in Nintex, whatever it is, you're gonna get different answers from everybody. So there's really not much of an excuse, unless you have the time to not get through, some kind of questions.
Totally. And I think, like, to your point, asking questions, coming prepared with questions, doing your homework, reaching out prior to the interview or post interview with the thank you. I think that showcases, we're talking sales and business development, that showcases your skills right there. And that's already showcasing, the characteristics of you as a professional, as part of your interview process. And so I think those are great points. I think being genuine and being authentic, like you mentioned, is so big. And just, people are going to gravitate towards a real curious you. And so you also mentioned some things not to do. And are there like some, definitive, I know you mentioned like, don't not have questions, don't let the time run out, but also, is there anything that is like a absolute deal breaker? And this is totally off the cuff here. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'm curious. Is there something where you'll hear and be like, oh,
I think one, and it depends on the situation, because I think you can explain it scenarios to me, because it's not like any bad situation that happens, you're always to blame. But I think there's a respectful way to separate out taking ownership of where you dropped the ball and what you learned from it, and respectfully speaking to people who maybe you had disagreements with, or maybe they dropped the ball and it negatively affected you. So I think it's the way that people, how they speak about especially their managers, their peers, when they're not in the room, because the way I view it is, if you're going to talk so poorly about your previous manager, how are you going to talk about me when I'm not in the room? You know what I mean? So that's something that's usually a red flag to me. But another like seemingly obvious one, which I say to people a lot, but especially in the business development space, is stick it out at a company for at least 6 to 9 months before you jump to the next thing, if you're doing it voluntarily. Like, I think obviously layoffs happen, that's out of your control. Family emergencies come up, out of your control, that's fine. I'm talking like you voluntarily leaving after 3 to 6 months because someone's offering you something shiny, and you want to hop. I think you have to do your due diligence, give at least a year minimum, sometimes more, but you really have to show that you've mastered that role. Because for me, when I interview people who have under a year, especially under 6 months, my first thought is, and I may not even get to the point of an interview, I may get blocked ahead of them, but my first thought is, what if I invest my energy in you and then you jump ship because something else shiny comes up? So I need a sense of loyalty that you'll at least stick it out for a year, 2 years, whatever. And then, I don't expect anyone to stay at one organization forever, but I think out of respect for the people that invested in you, at least stick it out a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you answered my why. I was going to dig into why. And I think that, to your point, showing loyalty, what if you just don't get along with your manager and it is just not a good fit, and it was just a scenario that was totally unexpected and didn't align with the expectations, and it's not a good situation, and you're 3 months in, 4 months in, what do you say to somebody who, do you say continue to stick it out? Do you advise to jump ship and like then plead your case in that next interview process? Like, how do you go about, I mean, because obviously circumstances can be so different.
Yeah, I've run into this actually with a couple people, to be honest with you, none of which I hired, because it's just a risk. Like 6 months, maybe. I think 6 months I would have the conversation. I would hope, and I don't mean to be naive because maybe I'm sure this happens, but I would hope that if you interviewed and were thorough in your interview, you would be able to understand, who the manager you're signing up for. Granted, they change, I get that. But my concern is when I speak to people and they tell me the manager does this, I'm so upset about this, I'm only able to hear one side of the story. There's always 2 sides to a story, and that's a risk for me. So I have to make a decision of, is it worth the risk to trust them, someone who I don't really know, and they haven't really been at their role long enough to prove themselves. And so for me, it's a risk, but I have other candidates who are lower risk. So how can you convince me that it's worth taking the risk versus hiring someone who's been loyal, has that track record? So it's tough, but it's just a risk that you have to be willing to fight for and articulate well to the person you're interviewing with, and not throw them down the bus or throw them, off the bus, say, oh, they, did XYZ, but just say what you learned from it. You have a better understanding of your values and the type of leader you want to have. And just don't talk down, about them.
And you bring up such good points, and it's good points coming from somebody like yourself that is in that hiring position, right? As a hiring manager, these are the things that you're thinking about. And so for everybody listening and watching right now, and you're in that situation that can be tough, that can be tricky, as much as you can, I think to Rachel's point, it's so important to stick it out as best you can because these are the things that leaders are thinking about when they are interviewing candidates and potential.
Or looking at their resume. You may not even make it past that point. That's what I worry for people who just leave. Because I know, like, our previous manager, Phil, that's a big thing he always instilled in me too. He's like, honestly, like, think about people who were here under 6 months. Why did they leave? What was your experience with them? And I'm like, I can't really think of many people, but it's just, there's usually more to the story that you don't fully know. And it's not always bad, but it's a risk. Yeah. And so you have to decide, is it a risk that you want to take?
And sometimes you don't ever get the chance to tell that story. And just to your point, on paper, that's what it shows. And so best you can, stick it out. You'll be better for it. If you can get through that, you can get through a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so I think that's super valuable and very helpful, especially coming from what, your thought process and how you perceive these topics and issues. And so, especially with layoffs happening right now, the macro
Mhm.
side of the economic world that we're in is tricky. There's a lot of people looking for jobs right now. And so I thought that it was an important topic to cover. And so thank you for your expertise in this issue. And
Yeah.
kind of just switching gears here before we get into the final questions, Rachel, is when you just think about why you've had success throughout your career. I know that you're an avid podcast listener. I know that we had our book clubs at Nintex, and we were always doing role playing and challenging each other in different activities. Are there specific things, and maybe it's organizations that you've gone through, maybe it's clubs that you've been a part of, maybe it's programs that you've launched or joined or courses you've gone through, but are there any maybe one or two specific things that you can think of that really enhanced your leadership, your business acumen, your sales and business development in general? Like any things that come to mind, like, if people are thinking about how to really take that next step to level up in their profession, in their career, whether it be in sales, business, leadership, or anything else that they're doing.
Yeah, I think for me, it's finding other people who do similar things either to what I'm doing today or what I want to be doing. And there's different platforms that I've found that help kind of orchestrate the networking, and also like courses and stuff like that. But a big one for me the last 2 years has been Pavilion, which used to be called Revenue Collective. But for me, that was introduced from a prior mentor that I had, and it opened the door to a bunch of other people and all types of titles: marketing, sales ops, revenue ops. And it's just a bunch of eager people who want to share ideas and help one another and ask questions and network and take courses and stuff. So that for me has been really beneficial. From the courses that I've taken has helped me up level, but the networking has been huge. I think it's been really refreshing to see how many people just want to share best practices and like speak the same language almost too. So even if you're trying to get into that field, you can reach out to people who are already in it and ask them, how did you get in the door? What was that like for you? And just don't be afraid to ask, because in my experience, everyone has been so nice. Like nobody has told me no. And granted, you got to be flexible with their time and whatnot, but I've had a great experience through that network, and kind of that's branched out to a lot more networks. But in like the BDR SDR space, also going to like an SDR leader .com, that's just dropping my name in there, getting access to that community. And again, everyone's so friendly, welcoming, and just making it a priority to block out time, meet with those people, nurture those relationships, because you never know when you may have an ask for them or you may want something. So it goes both ways. It's a give and a take. But just getting in a room with a lot of sharp, like-minded people with a lot of help to give.
Gosh, there's so much value to unpack in everything that you just said. And for everybody listening, first recap is Pavilion is what it's called, right? And so that's for sales and business development, revenue leaders, leaders in general, just in business. And
they're expanding. So it's primarily in like hyper growth companies. So any company where they're trying to accelerate growth and they want to bounce ideas off of like the infrastructure that you need to build that type of a company, regardless of the size. And anyone can join. It's like I can, give people referrals, but you can apply on the website. But it's just a really welcoming group. Like I've expanded my network significantly through that. And just learned a lot through the courses. Like I recently did one on hiring and interviewing and recruiting, and learned a lot through that. So it's been a great resource.
There's so much learning right at the fingertips of committing to something. And, because it takes like for you, the finding out about it, the research about it, and then actually taking action to, you said you had to apply for it and then you go through.
Yeah.
Okay. So then applying for it, right? But just small steps to actually get into those room with like-minded individuals, I think is, such a huge step for really just getting around the ways that people in your space and people in your industry are thinking, and learning new perspectives about things that individuals are interested in, or their, how others think about their careers that are in similar roles. And so I think that, and to your point, you just never know who you're going to meet, what conversation you're going to have, and where that can take you, and who else you can help. You probably have helped a lot of people in those groups.
Yeah,
And
it's been fun too, because you brainstorm and it's a little bit different than what you're used to. And it's led to, I mean, you even introduced me to Oliver, who's at a startup. So that's like a whole new experience for me, but there's some overlap, but still so much to learn both ways, like from his side that I can take pieces and implement, and also to just make me a more well-rounded, like, have a well-rounded understanding of how businesses operate. But yeah, they start branching out. The more you nurture the network you have, it just will naturally start to expand.
I always remember Phil talking about learning how the business operates is so big, just for learning, when you're in business, like knowing who does what, how you can help other people, what's important to them, because, when we work in these industries, we have external customers, obviously, but we also have internal customers, and so this is how you can connect with those other individuals and learn how they think, learn what's important to them, and ultimately be able to help everybody and grow in those ways. So super cool. I've always appreciated how you go out of your way and make it a priority. And the other thing that you mentioned was time blocking those activities and being very intentional with your time to actually make it happen, because you're only going to get in what you put out, obviously, but it can be so easy to attend those things by time blocking and committing to it. It can be just easy not to do it by not time blocking. So I appreciate that. Before we get into the final questions here, I was going through my backpack the other day, and I found some very interesting cards here. And so for those of you that are just listening, I have 3 note cards in my hand here, and this is an absolute throwback. I found one that is on the top. It says Earl Nightingale 30-day goal.
Oh gosh.
I'll read it here. It says, by February 6th, 2019, I became a sales development representative for Nintex, with the quote, "The time is now, just do it." And then on the back, I have like all my steps of things that I was committing to doing. It's 6 steps here. And I was calling it, the following is my plan and commitment to becoming an SDR by February 6, 2019. It was very timely. I was going through my backpack and found that this week. And then I had another one here that was called Book My First Meeting.
Love it.
And it was this note that
signature and everything.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, it just goes to show that man, you just never know what's going to happen with when you write things down, and I just thought it was timely to share that for this episode.
I feel like you got to frame that at this point.
I know.
It's like an antique.
Put it right next to the first contract that we ever got signed that's framed.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, Rachel, let's go ahead and jump into the final 4 questions. It's been great to have you on the show. And the first question is, it revolves around, what is your favorite book, your favorite podcast, your favorite YouTube channel, however you go about learning, just, any sort of resource or show that is, that you enjoy and that you would like to share with the audience here.
I really had to narrow it down because there was a lot. First, YouTube. Actually, I think you were the one that might have introduced it to me. Yes Theory. Was that you?
I mean, I'm all about Yes Theory. I know.
Okay, so they're my number one. Got way more into it in the last year, just like sucked into the YouTube black
Why?
hole.
What do you like about
Also
it?
wore the seek
Oh,
discomfort
let's
today.
go. For those
It was funny.
listening,
Miles came down and he's like, I got my new seek discomfort shirt. You have one too, right? And I've been wearing it.
Rachel's holding her Seek Discomfort shirt up right now on
Yeah.
the video. That is awesome.
So I love that. I mean, learning, but also just like learning cultures and like pushing past things that you are uncomfortable with or outside your limits. So I think it translates well in a different way. But I love that channel and their philosophy. In terms of podcasts, I wrote down a couple. Some of them they're all kind of similar actually, but with different hosts. So there's How I Built This and Wisdom from the Top with Guy Raz, basically just the founders of organizations like big name companies, how they built it from the ground up. And then Wisdom from the Top is people who are executives of those organizations now and just what their experience has been like and tips they have, especially during like economic downturn, that kind of thing. So those are super interesting. And then 9 to 5-ish by The Skim is very similar, but specifically focused on female founders. And so they interview people, same thing, their experience growing a business, challenges in their business during different parts. So those ones I love. And then last one is Rethink by Adam Grant, which is slightly different, but he goes over topics, even in like goal setting, like just completely rethinking the idea of goal setting and the effectiveness of it. He's just a really brilliant person and just makes me expand the way I think.
Interesting.
In terms of books, like sales work-wise, there's two that stand out. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Kind of like it helps you be more empathetic and understanding of how you communicate with people in a way that's not selfish and kind of getting what you need in a way that will be effective with the person that you're speaking to. It's a lot more to that, but it was something that stood out to me. And I think actually our CEO at Nintex said was his favorite book. And I would agree. I think it's really good. And then another sales book is The Challenger Sale. Another one that just makes you rethink things. And then currently I'm reading completely different style of a book, but it's Love That Story by Jonathan Van Ness, which he's on one of my favorite shows, Queer Eye. And I think it's important to mention though, because it's a different category of books, but it still helps me as a leader to be more understanding and like aware of things that are not closely tied to my day-to-day, like people who are having challenges in LGBTQ plus communities and stuff. So JVN basically goes through his challenges that he's experiencing and talks about some historical challenges that has happened in that community. So I think for me to be a better ally for my team, it's good to expand and get outside of just these, 9 to 5-ish, Wisdom from the Top. So I try to diversify and get, my toes in a couple different areas.
Rachel, I really appreciate your approach to learning and understanding. And if there's a takeaway that I'm taking away, and I think the audience can take away, it's that, it's really important to, as you're alluding to, be multifaceted and understand a variety of not only things and subjects and topics, but people. And right, like being able to connect with all the different individuals in Pavilion, having your wide array of things that you listen to, you read, you watch, you learn from, right? I think that, it enables you to be able to connect with people on, deeper levels in, a wide variety of different ways as well, and really helps with your, I would assume, your understanding of people and your empathy for people and their situations. And so I really appreciate your approach to learning in that way. Thank you for sharing those. And next question is favorite quote, and I think I might have an idea.
Yeah, you might.
What this might be. I remember seeing your wallpaper and screensaver for 2.5 years at Nintex.
Yeah.
Maybe you got something different for us, but go ahead and share.
I don't. It's also on my LinkedIn. I saw it. I think Ben, who we used to work with, had it on a slide. don't know how much intention he put into it, but it really resonated with me. But I think because of the experience I have, but there's a better way to do it, find it, by Albert Einstein. And I think for me, just like work-wise especially, I'm just always trying to find a better way to do whatever it is we're doing. There's always room for improvement, from processes to talk tracks, whatever it is. So I can only be satisfied for a brief moment before I'm already thinking, like, what other tweaks can we do? So yeah, that's my favorite quote.
Gosh, it's so applicable to everything that you do in life, right? Whether it's sales, business, making calls, talk tracks, whether it's planning your week, whether it's planning your year, whether it's having difficult conversations with spouses or kids or friends, or whether it's taking out the trash and you want to be more effective with your time, and whatever it may be.
True. I am trying to recycle more, so that is relevant.
Yeah. We had a guest on the show, Milan, and he was huge into sustainability, and so I've done the same, and it's been a very intentional thing on my end as well. So love to hear that. And I will go ahead and jump into the third question here. Bucket list item. I know that you are someone who loves to travel. I'm curious if it's going to involve travel, or if it's going to involve, something with experience in travel. But why don't you go ahead and give us one of your probably many bucket list items, Rachel?
Yeah. So my first thought was travel, which I will say, taking Miles to Japan is still top travel for me.
Okay.
I've been to Japan many times. He's never been, but my mom's entire side of the family is there. So that's definitely top travel. But I try to think outside of the box, because I also thought travel would be the obvious answer.
Yeah.
I think at some point I want to do some kind of creative side hustle. I don't know what it is yet, but I have friends that go to like pop-up markets and stuff, and it just looks fun. Like, not even for the financial aspect of it, but just to like make things and like have the satisfaction of someone wanting to buy it, whether it's like, I don't know, like candles, something like that. I have no idea.
Candles. That was the first thing I thought of, was you used to do your candles, and
I haven't mastered it yet, though, so I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I would have to find something. But I do feel like at some point that's in my future of just doing something for fun on the side.
I love it.
Just because.
Expanding the creative side of the brain. For those listening, I know, Rachel, that you have been into making candles before, and you have a I don't even know what you call it other than a desire, a burning passion for plants, and you have a very creative eye for design. And so, just right in line with being well-rounded, multifaceted. That's an awesome answer, and I love to hear it.
Thank you.
Last question that we have for you, Rach, and then we'll let you go here, is looking down the road, right? 65-year-old Rachel is looking at you today. What is 65-year-old Rachel going to say to you? And that can be with however you interpret that, whether it's career, whether it's leadership, whether it's just you as an individual. What would 65-year-old Rachel say to you right now?
So the first thing that came to mind was actually something that my grandma had said to me before she passed away. I asked her, like, what are some of your biggest regrets in life? And she said that she wishes she didn't invest so much time and energy in people that she felt like the obligation to, or people who like drained energy and like kind of didn't ignite her soul. And she felt obligated to spend time with those people. And so I've intentionally made more of an effort in the recent years to spend time with people who fuel, my creative side, or my desire to be a leader. So I'm very intentional about stuff like that. So I think that my future self would remind me, like, hey, take moments in time to reevaluate, and are the people and the activities that you do, that you surround yourself with every day, fueling you and not draining you, and setting yourself up, for your future self to be as successful as you can.
I really appreciate that. And I think that there's so much to learn from, people in our lives that have been through life experiences and, people that, have so much wisdom to share. And so, and I, your focus is what I appreciate about what you have done with that is it's not that you're cutting people out necessarily, right? And it's not that you're just cutting people off and the people that you're not getting energy from and getting, but it's a more of a focus on investing time with the people that do light you up and the people that you also help light up and inspire, right?
Mhm.
And inherently there will be less time spent with the other individuals, but that's not like the immediate focus. Whereas the immediate focus, what it sounds like, is
Yeah.
you're really intentional on spending time and investing time with people that are really lighting your fire. And
Yeah. And prioritizing it.
yeah, so very cool. Well, Rachel, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. It's been even more wonderful to have you as a friend, to have worked alongside you, technically worked for you, and you have and I mean this full-heartedly when I say that I would not be standing in the position that I am today without having your mentorship and also just belief in me, because Rachel, she mentioned it at the beginning of the show, is that I probably got maybe like a quarterly text from Rachel at least for 2 years to come over to Nintex. And it wasn't until the timing was right that I said, Rachel, I think the time is now. So then we reached out, but it was her persistence and pleasant persistence to
Pleasant persistence.
get me to come to at least have a conversation. And true to what we discussed earlier, you never know where that conversation could lead. And here we are today. And so I just want to thank you for everything. It's been awesome to see your growth and your development and where you're at and the people that you're helping and serving today, Rachel. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Likewise. I think, yeah, my career has significantly changed since working with you. I think you are one of those people who just energize me. You always have such high energy and you bring so much positivity to everyone that you connect with. So yeah, I'm grateful for your friendship and that we had the chance to finally work together.
Yeah. I'm sure you don't miss me sitting directly next to you, tapping you on the shoulder every 20 minutes saying, Rachel, what do I do here? What do I do there? So
It's a little bit quieter now, but
yeah.
it's okay. Now I miss those days.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of people miss I think that there's a lot to miss of being in the office and being around people that are doing similar things to you, because I think that there's a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy to be had for that office. And so, I know that you're intentional about staying around people. I know that I'm intentional about like trying to find community. And so I think that's a great last point there to end on. So,
Agreed.
well, Rachel, thanks for coming on the show and appreciate everything. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.